or small shops, and I've always been the server person, just because I was always kind of curious about it. I've been using Linux and different flavors of, or different server architecture and configurations for as long as I can remember. And my first dev job was, I was hired to cut up PSDs into HTML. And I was so excited about that, and that was the one thing in web design at the time, back in 2005, that I was absolutely the worst at. I was terrible at cutting up PSDs. Because I wasn't a designer, and I hated front-end stuff. But I found a company just outside of Memphis that would take a chance on me, because I was working at an office supply store running a sales team. And then I convinced this, or I conned this company into hiring me to be a developer, and I was like, yes, I'll do whatever you want. So I ended up building, instinctively building apps, hacking at web apps, hacking at infrastructure that they had built prior to me coming on. And it was a marketing company. I was the only developer. I was the second technical hire the company has ever made. So the previous technical hire was my boss at the time, who was essentially what we would call CTO. But he wasn't a developer. He wasn't a hacker. He was somebody who knew how to use AdWords. So he was the guy in the marketing company, right? So I got to explore, and once they realized that I was just really bad at cutting up front-end stuff, but I could deploy websites, and I could, once I had a design, I could deploy and customize stuff really, really well. That's kind of what they shifted their focus towards, that's what they ended up having me do. Worked out really well for me. And since there was two of us that had any idea what our browser was in this company, we had no DevOps. And back in 2005, arguably DevOps wasn't even a buzzword yet. So we invested in Metal, which in 2005 was a bad idea, come to find out. We should have jumped onto a lot of these VPS, the private virtual servers, and we didn't. We invested in Metal because, two people who didn't know any better at the time, and that's kind of what you get with small teams. So we invested in Metal, we hosted it out of our office, which was a bad idea because we didn't invest in backup batteries, which is unfortunate in a place where the power would go out every time we storm. So a lot of these hard lessons I learned, and we had just started using the cloud when I left this job. I was so proud. We had just set up deployed our first Linode server. We had about 150 websites using this Linode server as a database backend. I was feeding e-commerce sites. So it was, I was very proud of this because it was getting off of our Metal at that point in time when I left 7 years after I started in 2005, and I left 7 years later. It was, the Metal we bought in 2005 was old, it was aging, it really hurt. And that kind of brought me to my second dev job, which was, hey, I'm not alone, finally. I got hired into another agency that actually had developers. I was on a team of 3 different developers. So I was the 4th dev, but I was still kind of the server person. I was still the person who had more DevOps kind of background. I still knew, I was the second hire in the company that they ever gave sudo access to on the production server, just because I knew my way around and I was able to prove myself and say, yes, I know how to do these things. And the other developers didn't get that because they were like, we don't want that. We don't know how to do that stuff. So the problem I ran into in this job was scaling a team, and what we had to do is we had to not only scale up our team because we were adding developers really quickly because we had finally realized that, hey, this application needs some work. And the application at this job was a custom CMS because nobody ever uses something else, right? They always write their own CMS. I mean, that's the thing that you do. So this CMS platform, when I got to it about 2.5 years ago, it was already about 8 years old. So we're talking legacy PHP, we're talking 5.2. The server had come with 5.1, they had to do a ticket to get it to 5.2. So it's been running on the server, and this stuff's still in production. This stuff was a really good application for being something that was so old. So since they had no DevOps, and they essentially relied on Rackspace for the DevOps, which is a great way of doing it, but since I came in and I was like, well, we can do this a lot better and a lot cheaper, it was a matter of we needed to figure out how to work as a team because there was no version control when I got there. The core CMS was version controlled in Subversion, but only one developer ever touched it. And he only added a commit when he deployed a version. And he was actually working on the server and FTPing files up. So it was like working on live. Oh, it works. Quick, make a commit. And then that was a deployment. So one of the first things that we had to do as our team was version control everything. This version control is not renaming files. One of my favorites and worst clients I've ever taken on as a freelancer, they showed me the code base, and I was like, sure, just send me the repo. They sent me the repo in a zip file. It was not a repo. They thought it was the repo, but 42 files that started with index.php. And in between index and .php, there was initials, there was dates, there was pseudo timestamps. Not all the dates were in the same format. They're like, yeah, this is our version control. I was like, that's not version control. So in teaching and having to teach our team version control, the first thing I sent everybody to, and I was still learning a lot of this at the time, so I wasn't an expert. I just knew how it should have worked. I didn't know at the time necessarily how it was going to work. So the first time we finally said, okay, we're going to version control everything. We're going to send everybody to try GitHub.io, and you're going to do this over and over and over. This is what you do the first 10 minutes of your workday every day. Just go through it. If you've never been through this, and if you're not using version control now, it's a great introduction to get. How many people are not using version control right now? I will not shame you, it's fine. I understand. I understand where you're at. Of those that aren't, are you the only developer working on the project? Okay. Fair enough point. I'm not going to give you any crap over that because I've been there, I know how that is. Hopefully, once we've gone through this, I can show you what you would get out of that, even in the situation where you're the only developer. So the other thing that I was having our team go through was the GitHub Guides. And this is really great at trying to figure out how GitHub should work. Because once you have your brain wrapped around version control, the workflow is the next step if you've never done this before. Another thing with version control and learning it, trial and error is okay. Your commit history does not need to look like whoever's rockstar, super awesome at Git on GitHub's. Those don't have to look like your logs. I have many projects where I have 150 different commit messages in 10 minutes where I was trying to get something to work that I could only get to work when I had to push a deployment. So there's a joke, and I'm going to murder this joke. There's a joke where you spend 2 minutes getting your initial repo set up. You spend 25 commits getting Travis to work or other continuous integration platform to work. And that's exactly what I feel every time I start a new project. So trial and error is okay. Don't beat yourself up for not having a pretty commit history. That's really the least of your issues right now. The other thing that we had to do is we had to stop editing in production. So this application was a content management system. It had one entry point. It was domain name based. We had one server. Everybody hit index.php. The CMS would look up and see where they came from and then serve them the site. So we had 300 plus sites behind one index.php file in no modern framework. No framework really to speak of other than the CMS that we had built. So we were essentially serving all these clients off of one IP. And our workflow process was, okay, I'm going to work on site number 400. I load up my editor, which is just site 400. I connect through SFTP or FTP, and I throw files as I'm editing. So we're just live editing files, saving them, throwing them out there. And it was terrible because we were constantly breaking production. Now, the sites were all isolated enough to where you would only take down one site unless you were doing core development. If you're doing core CMS development, you could take down all 300 sites. And this is what it looked like. I mean, we would go through and this is obviously a Laravel application, but we would go through and edit, we'd right-click upload. Or we'd have a command upload. So the first thing I did, once I got everybody to agree on this, is I disabled FTP access for all of our users. It's like, you still have SSH access. This is just turning you off from the SFTP. So you can still SFTP if you really have to. Sometimes you just have to SFTP. There have been times where we found a glaring issue so bad, the only thing we had to do was SSH into the problem, change a 2-line code issue, and save the file. And that was because that issue was costing somebody money, whether it was us or a client. Those kinds of things happen. You always have to make sure you go back and put those in your version control. But we disabled FTP completely, and it really kind of made some people mad because they had to learn this new workflow. And well, their question immediately was, well, if I don't have FTP, how do I do my work? Well, the next thing was development environments. And what we were doing as a development environment was production. So we always knew the dev environment and production environment would always match. You never have to worry about environment bugs. Well, one of our developers was a huge MAMP fan, loved it. Did everything in it, had our CMS running in it, had all of the side projects running in it. These are great tools. MAMP, if you're not familiar, it's Mac, Apache, MySQL, PHP, and other things. It is an application you can run on your laptop, and it will be a full stack for you. There's WAMP, there's a version for Linux, there's a version for Windows. They're great tools. But my question is always, do you deploy to MAMP or WAMP? If you do, we should talk about some security things and get you off of this. But if you don't deploy to these, why are you developing on them? And I say that as somebody, and I say that as a hypocrite, because my current job, I have to use MAMP. Because some of our setups are so elaborate, there's just no way, and I have not had the billable time to fix this yet. But there's a way, there's always a way. So you shouldn't dev on something that isn't going into production. Well, the first thing on why you shouldn't do that is because you want to catch those environment bugs faster. You don't want to push a code that you've been developing on MAMP on PHP 5.2 to your production 5.6 version and realize, oh, you're using a bunch of stuff that's been depreciated, you're blowing up your warning logs. Or worse, you were using methods that don't exist anymore. And you also, this was the thing that we had to do, was we had to remove the phrase, it works on my machine, from all of our developers. Because that was our common excuse. Well, this site's broken. Well, it works on my machine. Well, that's not a thing anymore. We gotta get rid of that. So our goal was to stop using MAMP, stop using WAMP, start using Vagrant. And the reason is we wanted everybody running on the same environment all the time from start to finish. So if you're not familiar with Vagrant, who hasn't used Vagrant before? Awesome. Excellent. This is going to change how you do development. If you kind of buy into this, and if you're familiar with virtual machines, this will be pretty easy. If you buy into this will change your life as for a developer. This is probably my favorite thing that I've learned in the past 5 years as a developer. So Vagrant allows you to create a server, configure a server, delete a server, over and over and over and over and over. And that server never lives anywhere other than your local machine. Or it could live in other places. So if you don't know how to create a Vagrant box, but you know that you need one, because I'm telling you, you need one, that's easy. There's somebody that has figured this out for you. His name's Juan Terramino. And he created puffpad.com. This is a front-end GUI wizard that will allow you to create a Vagrant box and do almost anything with it that you need to from his GUI configurator. So you would tell it if you were going to use VirtualBox, supports VMware, supports Parallels, will let you select Debian, CentOS, Ubuntu, of course. You can specify versions of PHP, versions of Ruby. It supports, you can customize your users that you can have on this box. If you want to really test your users that have access to this box, you can create those users. You can create cron jobs, firewall rules. You can add databases and even seed them from a SQL export. You can set up your virtual host in Apache or Nginx, whichever makes more sense for you. Supports Node.js, HHVM, PHP, and it's all modern versions. He stays up to date on this. So when you install PHP, you can specify 5.4, 5.5, 5.6. And I believe he added 7 recently. So if you want to see how your app runs in 7, this is a great way of doing it. Also supports Elasticsearch, Apache Solr, Beanstalk, RabbitMQ. And the great thing about this is it uses Chef, which Chef is a provisioning tool for servers. It's like Ansible, it's like shell script provisioning. I'm forgetting the other one, Puppet. Puppet, yes, Puppet. I'm sorry, he uses Puppet, not Chef. I had that backwards. He uses Puppet, obviously, because it's the name. Sorry, I always confuse those. Now, if you're not familiar with Puppet, it's Ruby, and it's really great for configuring servers. And he uses a couple of tools that make it a little easy. So once you finish filling all this out, you download the zip file, you extract the zip file, there's a folder and there's like a file there. And you just cd that folder, you do Vagrant up, and there's your machine. It provisions everything using Puppet. So it's easy to, if you can read those files, and I believe it's all still YAML, you can go in and customize that even more. What I would do, and did forever, was I would have a script called customize.sh that I did, that was the very last thing that this box did. And that would do all the stuff that I couldn't figure out how to tell Puppet to do. Like installing stuff that it didn't support previously, and installing extra databases that it didn't before it actually had a lot of these more modern features that it does. So if you've never used Vagrant, please go check that out. It will really make your development environment creation a lot easier. Also, if you've never used Vagrant, Vagrant Cookbook by Erica Heide is also a great book to get. Walks you through a lot of different configurations, a lot of different scenarios. I believe she favors Ansible over Puppet or Chef. It works similar the same. Ansible is for each loops. It's for loops. It's for loops, for loops, for loops. That's essentially how Ansible works. Ansible is really great because you can do a lot of really flexible things with it. It's really kind of pick whichever you're more comfortable with, pick whichever one that you can read the code or the configuration for. So we had all this stuff. We were finally getting to the point where all of our stuff was making sense. We finally got on a development environment. Everybody's using version control. And the next thing was, well, we needed to test our code because our code had no tests. We had a functions.php file that was 5,000 lines long that made PHP Storm choke every time you tried to open it because of all the type heading and checking. So we had to test that. So that was a really hard thing to do because we didn't have the billable time for that, right? We weren't billing clients or ourselves for the core development work or testing, which is something that you've got to do. You've got to buy into that for testing. And the best testing resources is Chris Hargis's books. If you're not doing unit testing right now, start with either one of these books. I believe the one on the left is, that one may be newer than this one. The building testable apps is really good if you have a Greenfields project that is not too far along and you want to start doing some testing on it. That kind of helps you with architect and making your code more testable. The Grumpy Programmer's PHP Cookbook, PHP Unit, is more PHP Unit centric on how you can do things in PHP Unit. So once we had some testable code, the next step on our process of becoming a modern, or having a modern workflow, or being a modern shop, was we needed continuous integration and continuous delivery. And what that really kind of comes down to in continuous integration is we need to frequently integrate our code changes into the existing code repo. So for those of you that aren't using version control, what that means is I have a master branch, and master for us in our philosophy was master was production, it was always deployable, it was never broken. That's how we thought of that master branch, or trunk for Subversion. Everybody who wanted to go work on the application would branch off of master. And then we would add a feature, do a bug fix, and then merge that back into a dev or a staging branch. That was actually out on another server in a live test environment. We tested the changes there, brought it back into master, and that was kind of our workflow. Well, all of that, to do that manually was kind of a pain because you had to sit there, especially testing, because you had to go manually click on things to test. Because we had no unit tests, we had no functional tests, or acceptance tests. So what we wanted was to be able to merge branches and know and be really confident that this code was good. And even automate our build tests to ensure that any issues were found, the developer got feedback on their branches really fast. And this doesn't have to be deployed. These build tests that run, all these merges, they don't have to be deployed. You're not deploying anything when you're looking at and talking about continuous integration. Continuous delivery is that delivery component. It's essentially producing valuable changes in short cycles to be released any time. Very much agile headed. It's also called continuous deployment, continuous delivery. I use them interchangeably because everybody knows what I mean, right? Terrible way of doing things. So automated build tests ensures that if you find an issue, if you have an issue, it's found pretty quickly. It also really helps the developer when they're working on a feature branch, when they push changes up to their feature branch, if you're testing those, the developer can get feedback really fast. If anybody has not gone out and seen the engineering videos that Facebook did at their recent conference, F8, there are some really good continuous integration talks that they talked about how they do things. And their goal is immediate or soon, very quick developer feedback on their contributions. Because their focus is they don't want developers waiting on computers. They want computers waiting on more changes from developers. So their goal for their continuous delivery system is 10 minutes feedback. And they're only testing very small changes initially. So you can get that feedback really quickly. And that's kind of what we wanted too. I mean, obviously we weren't at Facebook scale, but that's what we wanted. We wanted that quick feedback. And thankfully our build tests went a lot faster than Facebook's. So which is right for you? What makes more sense? Your goal should be, in my opinion, continuous integration at least. Because that way everybody can just throw code like it's going out of style and it makes sense. You can trace back, you can fix things easy. Worst case scenario, you have to do a rebase or fix a merge conflict, and that's nothing once you get comfortable. That's fine. You want to strive for continuous delivery if it makes sense. One of the applications I had at my old job we built was a trading card platform that had a live event aspect of it. So these people would come in and they would buy in slots to participate in this card draft, and this live event would do all kinds of crazy things, letting them draft cards, trade cards, chat, all these different things. So we couldn't do continuous delivery for this application because we didn't want to deploy new code in the middle of a live event and change business logic, because that could be disastrous for that live event. So, and that's fine. That's, you have that kind of scenario. There's ways around it too. You could schedule this maintenance. I mean, that's the point or case for schedule maintenance patterns. But we didn't do that just because this client was wanting to be able to do these events at all different times of the day. So there's a lot of CI solutions out there. There's a lot of them that are free, there's a lot of them that are paid, some of them you run on your own metal, some of them you don't. Travis CI is probably the most common that everybody's familiar with, or people who have played with this are familiar with, because it's free for open source. Atlassian Bamboo is really cool. It uses your Amazon EC2 instances to do the build testing on. And Jenkins is the top right logo. That is very similar to TeamCity. It's Java-based build server, or test builds of your applications. Sorry. So there's tools out there, and Travis is free for open source. TeamCity is free for anyone. Jenkins is free. Bamboo, you just have to pay for your EC2 time. Now, if you want any extras, if you want anything, if you start to use a lot of different projects out there, then TeamCity will have some costs involved. Bamboo may as well, and I think Jenkins is free as long as you have the hardware to throw at it. So one of the other things that we found really useful was serversforhackers.com. And the guy that runs this site his name's Chris Fideo. I probably butchered his last name. He started taking all of the notes that he was writing down when he was constantly having to do server stuff, and it got to the point where his notebook was really big and really in depth and had a lot of great notes. So he started putting it out online for Servers for Hackers, and he's even expanded more most recently and starting to do videos for different techniques and different things. And I think he's starting to charge for some of the content, but you can get on his mailing list for free, and he'll send you some of these articles. I think he sends them out weekly or bi-weekly. It's really good information if you're not a server kind of person and you don't really understand that, but you want to. So the next thing that we kind of really had to work on was our process and creating our workflow. I mean, before we were just live updating sites and pushing up the changes. Maybe they'd get a version control checkout. And that was terrible. We had no way to go back and look at who broke something. Not to shame them, but to just be able to say, oh, well, don't do this next time. So we had to create this workflow of branching, pushing up changes, putting in a TeamCity server to put in and to be able to test our builds automatically. We had to do all of these different things and retrain our developers in some cases, and some developers took to it faster than others. I mean, whenever you come into a place and you say, well, you're doing this wrong or not in an efficient way, retraining them can be a little bit painful. So one of the other things that I figured out really quickly and kind of impressed upon my fellow developers was optimizing your time in the console. How many of you here are super familiar with the console and have no problems with it? I hope a lot of you are going to get something out of this then. So when I say the console, I'm talking about the command prompts, C:\\/ if that's how you roll. I'm so sorry. So, and this comes down to an age-old philosophy of work smarter, not harder, right? So the first thing that I hate about the console is I hate typing. And as a developer, that's maybe amusing. I hate typing because I think typing and keyboards are the most outdated interface on the planet. Why are we not just thinking this stuff, right? Typing seems so inefficient. So I hate typing, so I alias a lot of my commands. So git status. That's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 characters. 10 if you count the space. Instead of typing git status every time I do GS. Saves me 8 characters. Git pull origin master, git branch setup string. Vagrant global status, grep running. If you're not familiar with that, what that does is it asks Vagrant, hey, what machines are running? And then grep running, or I'm sorry, Vagrant global status says, hey, give me the status of all the Vagrants you know about. Grep running returns all the ones that are actually running. So that way I can see if I've forgotten the Vagrant down a box or Vagrant home, and that's why my machine's running slow. So all these different commands have some value, like start Redis. This is how you start Redis if you're using Homebrew. I never could remember that. So I just said, the hell with it, I'll just do this. So how did I do that? Well, it started out, I was using bash. So in your bash.aliases or .bash_aliases, and this is how long it's been since I've used customized bash, I can't remember that right. So you used to do alias gs, git status. This will allow you to take those long commands, and it will take some memorization. How many gamers do we have? How many people play MMOs? Anybody? No, not that many MMO players. Okay. So I always relate this to MMOs because you have to remember the key commands. You have to remember the moves on the game. And it takes some time to remember what git status' keyboard shortcut is, or VGR. So that may take some time, but just keep going after it, keep playing with it. And my favorite alias to show people is this guy at the very end. SSH supernova at joeferguson.me -t screen -dr IRC. Any takers of what that does?
Logs you into IRC.
Logs me into a machine.
Start screen, or restart screen.
Restart screen connects to a session that I have detached called IRC on this server, and which happens to hold my RSSI connection, which is my IRC client. So when I figured out how to do this, I thought I was the coolest person ever. I was like, nobody's done this before. And I Googled it. People do this all the time. So what I love doing is showing people this, and it's like, oh, well that makes perfect sense. So instead of typing that long command out, or even instead of typing SSH, user host, hitting enter, waiting, then doing screen dr, my screen window, I just do 3 letters, and it connects me to my screen, saves tons of time. Because I'm logging into IRC, clearly I have enough free time, right? So the idea here is use screen for long-running processes. Stuff that you are going to possibly get disconnected from your terminal from. This is stuff traditionally it's going to be more server-oriented stuff, like you're going to run an update process, or you're going to run a deployment on your server. And what happens if you get disconnected? Well, you have to figure out how to reattach that process to the foreground. Or if you don't know how to do that, you just have to go kill that process and you've lost your deployment. If you start it in screen, it'll be there. Even if you get disconnected, you can go back and jump right back in.
There's a horrible moment when you hit Control-AC and you realize you're not in screen.
In screen, absolutely. I have a default RSSI quit message that says forgot to attach in screen. So whenever I quit on RSSI, that's what it says. That's usually the only reason I'm quitting my IRC client. So think of screen as a detachable window that contains your console. It's a window that you can minimize, destroy, go away, and it's always going to be there, unless you exit. So the next thing that I found was bash isn't the only shell. Wait, what? There's corn shell, there's sh, there's all these other shells out there. There's ZSH is my favorite. So in finding ZSH, found a project called omai.zsh. And if you're interested in ZSH, check this out. It's awesome. And I'll show you some of the cool things that I do with mine. I actually don't use OhmyZSH. I use a forked, modified version that a friend of mine that is super crazy good at console stuff does. He did that, sent it to me and a friend of mine, and I was like, okay, I'm going to strip out some of the more crazy things, and then I kind of use a customized version of that. And that's what makes it so awesome, is you can do that really easily. It uses ZSH. There's 180 plus plugins. It's open source, and there's tons of contributors, and there's tons of themes and plugins and stuff that you can get out of the box really quickly with. So this is my shell. And this doesn't look like the traditional OhmyZSH shell because I've modified it a little bit. So you don't really think about your shell and how much valuable information could be there if you're not really spending a lot of time there, right? If you're just going to SSH into your shell and say, well, okay, open a terminal, SSH to my server, go do something. Go update apt, update your application, go deploy, whatever. There's tons of information that could be there that at a glance of an eye is certainly valuable. And it keeps you from having to look elsewhere at your watch, at your phone, the top right of your screen, trying to find out what the date is, what the time is. So in my shell, I have user host name, current path, and time on the left. In the right, I have all my local IPs, and you can see that when I did this the other day, I had a Vagrant running, so the 99.1 IP is from one of my Vagrants. I have the date, and I have current time. More often than not, well, current time is actually on the other one, not that one. So more often than not, I'll leave these terminal windows open for multiple days. So being able to look and see when I last ran a command on that is helpful for me. So this is my shell on a remote server, which is the exact same content, but it's red, so I know not to shut down that box. I did this like 10 times before this finally clicked on me. I'm like, I should just make that a different color. Like, where'd the server go? Oh, that's where it went. I also have a habit of putting yellow as my Vagrant machines. That way I just know that yellow is Vagrant, red is server. Yellow I can shut down, red I shouldn't. Green I can always shut down. And those kind of hacks and tricks are kind of the things to think about. So the question that I always get asked when I talk about ZSH and my ZSH is, why should I use ZSH over Bash? And honestly, I don't know. I use it because a friend of mine did some really cool things that blew my mind, and I'm like, cool, I want to be able to do that stuff. So this is what I show people now when they ask. What I've done here is I've CD'd into this folder, I've done cd space database, and I hit tab. Then I hit tab again for tab complete. And that second tab made this highlight for database because that's what I typed in. At this point, I can now left and right arrow or continue to tab or shift tab around this directory structure, which with this many folders is not that big of a deal, but when you're in like a project with 100 files, that's really handy. So being able to do advanced tab completion is really awesome to me. And then this is my ZSH RC file. It's like bash RC. This is how I build that console. There's usually a couple of different plugins to handle that. And you can see I have user host, PWD for per working directory, I have subversion, get support, jobs, and vim. Jobs will actually let me do a get time, which I actually have disabled. If I want to see how long a command is running for, I actually have something in here that I have disabled that will tell me how long the command took to run. Back when I was having to do long deployments, that was more of an issue than it is for me now. So the next step is to automate common tasks. And you want to alias long commands, like the update. If you ever run apt-get update, what did 9 times out of 10, or should you have run before, right? I'm sorry, I said that wrong. If you do an apt-get upgrade, you should have run apt-get update before, right? Why not just write a script for that? Why not alias that? Don't type that out and get it backwards like I just did. Then you're updating on old packages. Use cron to run scripts at specific times. At my old job, we had our entire backup infrastructure was based on cron jobs. Cron, rsync, and then we rsynced them down to a local box that was using Crash Plan Pro. So we had like 5 copies of our backups, and it was all managed by shell scripts, by age. So I set that once, and then I forgot about it. And we never ran out of local disk space, even though we were pulling down 200 gigs a day. Never ran out of disk space because I was only keeping 7 days. And I just scripted that. Create installers for your settings. Like my bash files or my ZSH stuff is all in a private repo. That whenever I get access to a new server, the first thing I do is install Git if it doesn't have Git. And then I pull down my settings, and I have my environment, and I customize it for whatever server that is. And kind of an example for that would be when 1404 came out, there wasn't an easy LAMP configuration for my particular use case. So I went and created a shell script. So if I wanted to spin up a new LAMP server, I could provision a new Linode server, pull down this Git repo, run my command, and I had LAMP. It was ready to go. A friend of mine, Dan, wrote this repo called vimdirt, which was his crazy, ridiculous Vim settings, which I give him total credit for anybody who does or spends a lot of time in Vim. I have total respect for you because I can't just wrap my brain around that. But he has all of his plugins, all of his configuration settings are all just sitting there in a repo that he can pull down on any machine he wants to run it on. And it's his native environment. It's like having PHP Storm or Sublime Text installed on every machine you have access to. It's really cool. This usually doesn't need to be said, but I still say it. Please don't version control your SSH keys. If you want to have some fun, do a GitHub search for ID_RSA or whatever it is for the generic, the default key. It's sad. Some of those are legitimate, just bad, insecure keys that they need for some reason, which is fine, whatever. But a lot of people, when you're trying to version control your environment, trying to add your local dot files to a repo, of course SSH makes sense, but it doesn't. Don't do that. So, recapping. Version control everything you can. If it changed on your local machine, try to version control it. If you can't, back it up. That's kind of my philosophy. Everything that is on my laptop right this second that I don't have physical copies of is either in CrashPlan or GitHub. That's not only for disaster recovery, that just makes spreading that information to others and showing others how you do something a lot easier. You should create a process that works for you, that works for your team. Works for your team is a big part that often gets forgotten about. You know, well, I have this working and it's working my way and it makes sense for me. If you're on a team, it may not make sense for everybody else. So make sure that it makes sense for those people. Practice how you play. Don't dabble in something that you're not deploying to. Right? Make sure that the environments match up. Make sure that there's not going to be any easy bugs that you could find just by duplicating your environment to be the same as production. Test everything you can. I'm a big fan of testing. I hate unit testing though. I hate mockery. It drives me up the wall. I just can't ever get it to work right. So I do acceptance testing and functional tests. Those make a lot more sense to me. Codeception, PHP spec will make your code testing experience a lot better if you've never done it. I especially like Codeception because I can go write business case, load this URL, look for these elements on the page, pass or fail. And that's what really makes it easier for me to be able to test my applications as much as I can. And then last, automate everything you can. Anything that you're doing, think about all the stuff that you're typing into your console every day, every 10 minutes, every 5 minutes, every 2 hours. What if that could be automated to just run as a background process? What could be an alias? What could be a shell script? And kind of, put that to work. Maybe, work smarter, not harder. It's kind of where that goes to. Any questions? No questions.
You mentioned rsync. I'm not very familiar with what that is. Would you mind just saying a sentence or two about that as well?
Yes, rsync is a command line application. It's almost, I think it's on every distro. It allows you to synchronize files between folders. So if you have home user site A, home user site B, you could use rsync to copy everything from site A to site B. And it can copy permissions, it can copy file timestamps, or it cannot, depending on what you need. The other great thing is you can use a tool called rsnapshot, which I believe is built into rsync, that will allow you to do snapshots of remote or local file directories and send them out remotely. So at my old job, what we did is we had www or superalls and CMS, and that's where all of our content was. So on a local machine, we had our snapshot running that fetched everything out of that folder and pulled it all down. Well, the great thing about our snapshot was it was only going to get changed files. So we weren't downloading our entire 500 gig application folder every time. we only got file diffs, or files that had changed. And then we did that weekly, so I had 7 days of all the file changes. So if a client came in and deleted something off their site, I just needed to know what date it did it as long as it was less than 7 days. And I could go pull it off. And our snapshots just makes that a little easier. Yeah.
Vagrant is something I want to learn a little more about.
Sure.
I've never used it before. When you spin up a server, is it running in a container?
No.
Are you talking about just like a HTTP server process?
Are you familiar with virtual machines? Like VirtualBox to... So in virtual machine, if you wanted a new machine to play with, you would create a new virtual machine, you would install from an ISO, you would configure it, and then you would start working with it, right?
Right.
Vagrant skips that whole first part.
Okay.
Vagrant uses...
But it's a virtual machine.
It's a virtual machine.
Okay.
Vagrant uses virtual machines API to create the machine, configure it to your settings, and also provision it, which is outside of VirtualBox, but that's Chef, SaltStack, or Salt, Puppet, whatever. And then it gets you going faster. So what that also allows you to do is destroy that box and create it again without having to reinstall or reconfigure.
So you can run a test that corrupts the state,
Sure.
and then just destroy it and recreate it.
Yeah. So what you're doing is when you do Vagrant up, and if it's a modern Vagrant box that's using Vagrant Cloud, it's kind of like Composer or NPM where it goes out and it looks for the box that you're trying to use, and it will download this probably maybe a gig, some of them are a gig, some of them are 400 or 500 megabytes, this .box file, and it copies that into a hidden folder on your home folder. That's what gets used to create those Vagrant machines. So they copy a local version of that .box file to your project folder. That way when you destroy it, you're not destroying the box file you downloaded. So you only have to download it once or listen to updates. And that way you're spinning that up every time.
And then, do you just use Vagrant to run like dev environments, or do you even use that for production environments?
So Vagrant as a tool will tell you up front really quickly that it's designed to be inherently insecure. So I wouldn't run it on production. The goal would be to run your provisioning tools also on development, like Ansible or Chef, Puppet, any of those tools. You would run that stuff on your production environment to make sure that any of those changes get updated. But no, I wouldn't take a Vagrant config and put it live, because I make my Vagrant boxes all really insecure just by nature.
Just because you're working.
Since Vagrant uses SSH to communicate with the box files, it's actually using Vagrant with an insecure RSA key as the main method of interacting with the box and running scripts after the box has been booted up. So then it also has passwordless sudo for the Vagrant user. So crazy idea to put that in production, right?
How do you manage configuration schema changes in database?
Migrations. That is about the only way I have found to do that, and I have struggled with that a lot. If you're not using a modern framework, I believe there are a couple of different migration setups out there that let you do that. At my old job where we had the custom CMS platform, I actually wrote my own migrations. I would highly recommend not doing that, finding something else that was gross. That was just before I knew any better, and I had to have migrations so I could spin them up in my local environment. I also took database snapshots and just used that at some point as well before I had my migrations finished.
So is there a tool? I've been looking for PHP migrations for a while. And
There is.
sometimes a tool.
I want to say Thing, but I don't think that's right. I think Thing is a different thing. Why are you searching Yahoo? That's terrible.
Firefox default was changed.
Oh, right, yeah.
They switched a little bit.
I use Firefox for like my work stuff. I don't remember what I was using. Actually, you know what?
That's one of our biggest challenges. We've got terabytes of data, and being able to snapshot that for dev is difficult.
Doctrine migrations wouldn't be awful if you intend to use doctrine migrations, or if you're intending to use doctrine. Doctrine is a little heavy to just pull in for migrations. Might work.
Well,
I'm
then
sorry I
you-
don't have a better answer for you there.
Yeah, then you end up having to pull in Symphony too.
In dev, it's not that big of a deal,
No.
technically, but any other questions?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So maybe this is sort of the same question, but I'm really interested in Vagrant. I've never used it before, but it sounds cool. So once you spin up your virtual machine that you're going to use for developing on your local machine, how do you then get your database and everything in there? All of your files that you're developing, you get to copy those over, or is that automated somehow?
Traditionally, it's not automated. You have to figure that out yourself. What kind of stuff are you doing? Are you using like Laravel? Are you using Symfony?
I'm
Using
just using WAMP stuff.
LAMP stuff?
I develop on my local machine, just using the Apache PHP.
if you're not tied to any version of PHP or Apache or anything like that, look at Homestead from Laravel. Homestead is Laravel's Vagrant environment. It's designed to let you just do one command and have your Laravel application installed.
What do you do for your Vagrant boxes? How do you get your database in there?
I will show you one second.
Are you talking about just getting files into Vagrant? So
Yeah, because
There's shared directories that you can set up in Vagrant.
Then
so
you
that's,
share,
that's
like,
my web file,
part-
but then how do I get a copy of my database in there?
So in the situation of
Bar dump, or I have to SQL dump my database.
That's one
copy the
possible way
file
of doing it,
over.
yeah.
Or you can just have a different data, like, so not have your database local, like, I don't know what your situation is, but one possible solution is to have a different machine that runs the database that doesn't go up and down, and Vagrant connects to that other machine.
So this is a Laravel project that I have. It's Laravel 5. I have Homestead shoved into it. So this is also my site. So I can run my site off of this. This is what gets, everything is here's what gets deployed to production. When I do Vagrant up here, it boots up the box, shares all the folders. By default, it shares the current folder that I'm in, .to/Vagrant in the VM, and that's where all the scripts and stuff are run from. So in your situation, what you can do is take a snapshot of your database as a SQL file, and then have a command here that would do, like at the top there, I'm doing a MySQL command. You can have it import your database there on provisioning. And this is a script that I just added. You can actually do this in Homestead. It's a little bit different now. But this is like an example of what I do after Homestead runs. And Homestead is all provisioned with shell scripts, so it's pretty much out of the box, ready to go. And this is the stuff that I do that I don't get out of Homestead, like some Ven.js stuff for testing.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? Awesome, thank you.